Our next question is, what is the reason for this surge? I thought cases were going down, so how did they go back up?
I'll take a crack at it, and then Bill can articulate more clearly. So cases were going down a while ago, quite some time ago. And basically since the restrictions have been loosened, they've always been kind of crawling back up. That's always been kind of the trend. And then you had some really big events, say, for example, schools opening back up. And schools themselves are responsible for X number of cases, fine, but schools aren't only a place where people go and learn and teach. They also come attached to all of these other things like extracurricular activities like sports and sporting events and practice and swim meets and parties and get to get like all kinds of things that come along with school. And that goes for elementary school all the way up through college. You see a lot of different movements like once schools started back up. So that's one big thing. And then also with schools, also universities, what you started to see with schools starting back up is cases were surging, especially in the late teens and 20-something range. And that was primarily driven by, college attendance and being on campus. And then just in general, we've been seeing more relaxations of our public health orders and guidelines, and also pandemic fatigue. And so kind of the events of just like, well, everything seems to be fine, therefore we can start to resume life as normal, because that's what everybody craves right now, which is completely understandable. That's kind of how we got where we are. And it's one of those things too, where the things that might not feel quite normal yet, where most people, or not, maybe not most people, but a lot of people are still working from home. And that has kind of started to feel a bit more normal to people. And that's kind of something that collectively we can internalize, and it feels all right, because like bars and restaurants and schools are open. So it still feels okay. It doesn't feel quite as heavy as it did. But just with the relaxation of those public health guidelines and orders, and schools opening back up being a huge one, and pandemic fatigue, I think that's really where all of this was always bound to go. And I mean, we've been creeping up since the public health, like the relaxation of those public health orders started, basically.
I think Katie's spot on. And something that I'm interested to just watch clinically is whether there's any, what the science will show. How does the virus spread and thrive in kind of cooler, dry air, versus the warmer times? That's something that's kind of intriguing to me. In addition to the things that Katie mentioned, we're just now moving more indoors. We're less outside, and so that's going to cause more spread. Your number one risk of catching this virus is if you have a household contact. And if you have a household contact, guess what? It's just really hard for people to isolate and not spread it to the other members of their house, especially if we're now all indoors watching, streaming, binging on Netflix, right?